Okay, so here we are again. In this video, I'm going to go through explaining the cosmogony and the performance art involved with Fever Ray and what the project is about leaning into and how it connects with what I'm working on. And this is all out of respect, but I am going to reveal a ton about this. I've been working on this video and this topic for about a year and a half. So bear with me. I have all my notes out. I might stumble and stammer around a little bit as I go through this, but let me approach it this way. Let me start with really the conclusions of the project and what I think it's about. And then I'll go all the way back to the beginning and we'll go through the video series and the story that's being told by the band. Okay, so I want to say this too about my artwork as well as William Blake and Fever Ray. There are multiple pieces at play here. And it's not like you can just go and read a William Blake poem and feel like you've gotten the sense of what's going on. That's just an abstraction. That when you go to Urizen or to the Book of Job or to the other poems that Blake had carved into wax and then printed and then watercolored and then bound himself, you're stepping into the totality. You're moving into the totality of the thing, whereas each individual piece and part does matter. It does say something. Like in my play, in my art, and in my performance, you could do each of the one independently, but it's all things together that really give you the whole picture. So I'm going to go with the conclusions of Fever Ray and what the work is about in totality. And it's about really, in my view, two key things. One of them is this is Karen's ascension into the Pantheon of the gods. And she is, through the show, and I saw the show live, through the performance, that is the offertory. That is the altar where she's making the offertory, making the sacrifice. I actually had this feeling watching the show and I couldn't explain it. It took me forever to kind of realize how this is functioning, okay? And it sounds crazy. It might sound really bizarre to you, but you're not the magician archetype, all right? And it takes a magician to talk about a magician. So just bear with me here. The other part of it is about the ultimate fate of human isolation. That's very deep as well. And there's a whole character which I'll refer to as the shell, which gets created. And we're going to go through that. But just keep those two conclusions in mind. And as I sort of step through this, okay, this is February 2025. And you can call my bluff here. You could say, this is some guy talking about somebody else's artwork. He doesn't know anything. Watch this. I predict strongly the next album, if the project continues, this is a project that does not actually have to do anything else. It is actually very tightly coupled and concluded, okay, in an eschatological sense. But you could do one more part to this, which is either one of two things will happen. So if there's another Fever Ray album and corresponding series of artwork that comes out, it will be in one of these two veins. It will either be the ascension or the descension into where the Pantheon of the gods is located. There's a lot of playing around with both polarities in the artwork. There's a lot of going into the depths, going into the water, coming out of the water. So there might be a descension there, but otherwise there'll be an ascension. There's also a cosmological element to this where the cosmos is involved. So that's one path. The second path will be the return. It will be the re-spiraling, reintegration, and continuation of the cycle. Okay, so that's my prediction on where this project. It really only has two. It's either going to be one of those because the project is too smart to do the same thing over and over again. That would be. I'm not even going to. It's not even worth entertaining that. So, okay. Let's start now. I'll take you through, and you can do this yourself. You'll get a lot more out of what I'm about to tell you if you've never watched all the videos or haven't heard of the artist. Go to the YouTube page, go to Fever Ray's page, go to the videos, go all the way down to the very first video, If I Had a Heart, and start there. The story goes in sequential order. All the videos tell the story, and so do the songs, and the albums will help too. The albums have a connected sequence to them, okay, and I'll go into that, but it's all there. But this is a great place to start, and you can go through the videos, which will give you a lot more information. And then you should also watch one of the live shows. There's a bunch of the live shows that have been recorded, and the live show starts the same way as If I Had a Heart starts. Out of the darkness, out of the fog comes the light. Okay? And I'm not going to go into all the symbolism to all this stuff. I'm going to call attention to a couple of very key and very interesting symbolic choices, but the material, the art is just rife with. There isn't anything accidental. There's nothing accidental going on here. What you see is part of the story, okay? And you can just have a field day with that. It's really interesting. But going back to the beginning here, and I'm just kind of checking my notes. All right, let's go on the adventure here. So let's talk about If I Had a Heart. The opening of just the, I don't want to go into what these symbols represent, but again, it's just like the Promethean myth of fire from the gods coming out, moving through the sort of river Styx or the river of memory. That myth is actually where after you die, you dip your head inside of the river and it replenishes you in your next life or whatever. But there's some spirit creatures, okay, on the side. There's some other, gods and totems and things. And they are real interesting in this first section because they seem unchangeable. They don't really do anything, but they're sort of just present and around. And so If I Had a Heart, there's a shot where the pool is totally empty and you're looking at a building, and if you look at the top right corners of that building, there's a circle with a triangle in it with another circle in the center. That's actually the symbol for Alcoholics Anonymous. That is the dry part, the drying out from alcohol. You're in the sober state, but there is also no life occurring here. And so everyone is sort of in a stasis or dead, but they're not decaying. And you just sort of meander through the awakening and the opening of the maw and the voice and the formlessness of the voice as the creation myth begins. And you can actually hear, if you listen very closely to the audio, a sort of wetness in the opening of the mouth. And it's there intentionally. There's a lot of other audio little things that are going on in a lot of the songs if you listen closely. But that is an intentional sort of artifact where the world is being born from this sort of formless voice, okay? It then, the next video, When I Grow Up, introduces us to the young demiurge who comes out and creates the waters and creates the chaotic waters. Like I was saying in my hypermodernity video, the chaotic waters of Nun, the Egyptian myth, is where a lot of my artwork is pulling from, and that is in the chaotic waters, and it's in the theogony as well. I can't remember the characters' names in the story, but it's like the male at the climax of his orgasm has his penis cut off and it's thrown into the ocean, and as it's ejaculating, that's causing all the life in the sea, and there's all this turmoil in the water. I think that's the theogony. But it's I'd have to look it back up, but that's in one of the creation myths. Anyway, so the young demiurge here comes back later and sort of creates a character, but you can read about what the demiurge is. But this is sort of like creating the world and revitalizing, and this goes on through a series of the videos about, you know, really reflecting on nature and the mother archetype. And there's a lyric in What They Call Us that says, it's a common misperception. This is not a band ready for a dissection. Now mommy's gotta work, see the land. This is not a band. This is a much bigger project than just making music. And that's coming out here in the revealing of the sort of land and the spirits, and that's what I'm saying. This is a pantheonic myth of many gods, and working and creating a sacrifice so that you can engage with these many gods and you can become one of these many gods. It continues into then the last video for this album, Keep the Streets Empty For Me, of just a woman walking around a sort of desolate set of sidewalks. It's another great one where it's just like the mood shifting light, really just like the bare bones of entertainment, but it's so good. And it goes back to like the black and white, and it just reminds me of, you know, character-based artwork like Buster Keaton. Just phenomenal, and just sort of like this you know, sense of isolation. This is bringing up this is another one that concludes, just as later on when we get to North is really the exposure of the human isolation. But this is the same kind of thing where I said this project kind of keeps bringing this back up. Okay. It's also, I'm just looking at my notes here, and I want to just say this because we're about through the first set of videos, and I'm going to go into the second set of videos where it takes a very different turn. But it'll be hard for me to work some of these comments in otherwise. But like, this is not a work of reformation where something needs to be reformed and be changed and be done. There isn't something to be done here, and my work is very much in line with that as well. Like, this is not a call to action in any kind of way. This is yeah. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to go into the Switch Seek Same Plunge Part 1. You should look at that. And this is starting to bring in the technological elements into the art piece. There's laptops and there's a sort of digital communication going on. and there's the demiurge coming back, but in a kind of a different way. It's not in the exterior world of nature, but it's in an interior world of isolation. And it's my projection that it's the same character. It could be a different character, but I think it's fairly well connected and it looks fairly similar. And it's a sort of real interesting to think about. But okay. So there's some early signs that there's also going to be this sort of excess sexualization that's occurring. The sort of dark sexual energy is starting to emerge, and it comes out more later. I really think this is just more interesting for what Karen is personally pursuing than it. It's, I don't know if there's much relation to the whole art aspect of this, but it's like that would be really interesting. I mean, that's like something only I can't explain that. I cannot explain why it takes this direction, but it goes into To the Moon and Back, and this creates the shell, the character that gets created out of now the technological pool. And there's a little kind of nod to Shinya Tsukamoto's work here. If you've ever seen Tetsuo, the Iron Man, there's these cables and there's this twitchiness to the reveal of the character. And great film. I used to own that video. It's so there's a little nod, I think, to other artists in here. But the shell comes out, and it kind of staggers around, and it's getting its legs, it's crawling, it's going through the sort of from the child crawling to standing to from this sort of synthetic transition into as much of a natural state as it can ever achieve, although it never fits in anywhere. So yeah, I think I'll move past To the Moon and Back, but then the demiurge comes back and kidnaps and throws into the back of the truck at the end of the video the shell character. There's some additional audio pieces here, and then there's a part 4 to some takeover. I think that has some more technology stuff in it, but then you get into Wanna Sip, which is now the excess is massive. This is really showing the total lack of any kind of boundaries. And what can I say? I work with zero boundaries in my artwork. There are no boundaries to what I'm doing. So it resonates a lot with me. But it's grotesque. I mean, a lot of this part of the performance art is fairly off-putting. It's meant to sort of, it's everything. It's visual, it's audio, it's fingers and fingernails and urine, and you die in the piss and the shit just the way you were born, and it's like, yeah. But it keeps on going through Wanna Sip and into the transcendental friendships where the shell is meeting the other characters. Actually, some of the other characters are met in To the Moon and Back, and they're in the live performance show as well. They're a little bit different, but there's other sort of gods in the Pantheon, right? I mean, there's other sort of characters that seem to have magical, mystical powers that you're not really sure about, and they're not entirely revealed, but they're taking over in a sort of possessive way of the shell. And I don't know. I don't want to get too into my own stuff here, but it's like in my work, this is the phantasmagoria machine of technology. It does possess people. They are a lot of afflicted spirits where they have all the contours of a person, just like the shell does. It looks human, but there's nothing on the inside, and it wants what it wants only because the others around it want it to have this thing or want it to go in this direction. It doesn't actually have a self of its own where it can pursue what it desires. It has no desires. So yeah, they're sort of manipulating, and there's physical energy, there's sexual energy, but there's a transcendental part that comes into this. And I Don't Know About You also concludes with a transcendence here in the video for the end of the album. And I tried to watch all these again. I've watched these videos a lot. I can't actually remember all the stuff here, so I gotta just skip past that one for now. Okay, and then we're to What They Call Us, but that's the next split. So that's 2/3 of what's going on here. Let me just check my notes. It's gonna be hard for me to fit this in on anywhere else. So let me just say it. Like, this is a whole art project that it doesn't give you reasons to conform to what you've already decided it is, and that's part of it is, I think, that's affecting me here as I'm trying to describe all of this. Like, and I want like I really haven't decided what this all is. I could be totally off base and wrong, and it would be great to hear someone else's impression about this, but this doesn't really conform. And that's why I go into the there's a telos here, there's an arc, there's a clear cosmogony and world creating, and there's the bringing in of all the elements of our what it means to be human and what it doesn't mean to be human. And like, it's myth making, right? I mean, this is what the greatest stories ever told are doing. So, okay. Let me just see here. All right. So, okay. What They Call Us, and I was saying there's a lot of references back to the original. If you put What They Call Us on with headphones in and you listen very closely after the it's like right into the first chorus, there's an audio beat of a distorted heartbeat, much like you would hear through a I can't remember the machine for the baby where you listen to the baby's heartbeat all of a sudden. But anyway, it'll come back to me. It's like listening to the heartbeat through that device. And it's again back to If I Had a Heart, right? And the heart is there, and it's actually in the background, and it's faint, but it's alive. And so there's all these like touch points here. And Then the shell in this video is getting much more into modernity. All right. And what I'm saying actually is hypermodernity, which is a lot of this intellectual knowledge worker, office worker stuff. And the shell's trying to just be kind of normal, but of course they're not normal, and they don't really have any, feelings and thoughts of their own. And they're I think the other gods are still kind of present in some of these videos in the backgrounds of things. Like they never quite leave, but the shell is really alone on some of this stuff. And then carbon dioxide is all just computer to user, right? There isn't another person even in the video. There's like a skeleton hand, and but there's a lot going on in that too, and there's a revealing about them carrying the nest for the elves, and there's the reference to nests in another song, and so in the building of the nest when we kind of get to the witch. But okay, one thing at a time. The candy video is really interesting. It's one of my favorites. I really can't explain this one too much either as to the demiurge and the shell sort of in this amorphous sexual dance. Whether it's the dance macabre or what it is interesting. It really scared my son when he was like 6 years old and I had it on, and there's not much scary about it other than the faces, but he found that one really scary. So then we go into some additional teasers, and then we get to Tapping Fingers, the official visualizer. And I'll just say, like, Tapping Fingers is probably my favorite song. It's great. And I love this one as the entrance for the witch. And she's just putting on makeup in front of a mirror, her narcissism and her blending through this whole process of the externalized libido with the introverted internalized psychopath is great. Like, that's the character. So you get all this sort of motherless, childless, archetypal energy in the queen and like the huntress, and just like the neatliness, the tidiliness, the sort of attention to detail. I have a character in my play who is constantly polishing themselves, like, and I do the same crap, but it's like they're really obsessed about how they look, and they're always kind of like, doing stuff to kind of like polish their physical presentation to you, which is kind of like what's going on here. You're seeing the polishing of the character, but what's inside the witch is like dark evil. It's a totally rotten core and frightening. So then you get to even it out, where you find like people are in the shed and she's hacking up bodies and she's burying them in the ground, and she's like the opposite of, I always think about this, like the, childless women in the past would either go to monastery and the nunnery, or they would go to the nursing institutions, the mental institutions, and still a lot do go into nursing. But now the nunnery is no more. So this kind of energy to me seems like, if it would have been diverted or not diverted, but if it would have had a deeper conduit to connect with, like, you could see maybe someone this passionate going into a whole other field. But when those fields aren't available, then you get these weird mutated outputs of things. So I don't know why this is a weird output, in that kind of sense. Like, we don't have a lot of great backstory on the character. I just know that, she lives alone, and there's a lot of like sort of crotch rubbing and crotch shots and sort of like again there's sort of libido that's doesn't have anywhere to go, right? And it's creating a psychopath. All right, back to even it out and what they call us. Didn't I cover that? I covered what they call us. Okay, and then we get to North. Now, this is a totally standout breakout video, right? This is back to like going through this whole series, and then you land on North, and you're just like, what? What is going on here? It's hard to... I remember when this came out. Like, it was hard to comprehend. How does this fit? This is the internal isolation. This is the cold, desolate world. There is no one around. There's no one coming to your rescue. This is the ultimate fate of the human condition. I agree with this. So it's maybe that's why it resonates with me in this way. But it's like you are alone. You are psychologically alone. You are impenetrable. The best you can do is try to communicate and try to communicate with words. But words carry with it their own kind of tyranny, and so you don't have to talk with anyone here. But this kind of reveals to me, and maybe there's some question of whether this project continues, but this kind of reveals to me like why it's here, because this is a key part of the whole of the project is this human isolation, right? And this fact that we are alone. And then the final last video, which is Shiver, which is where I put a clip into my art from this video. With the teeth, especially, because I have a lot of teeth stuff in my art. Actually, I gave a piece to Karen when she came to Portland, and it was one of my labyrinth pieces. And so this is one of my show pieces that lights up, and I actually put into the center, those are my son's teeth. And there's all these little sperm that glow in the dark kind of going through the labyrinth, and I have a little remote control for it and stuff. So, anyway, I gave Karen an art piece like that at the show, and I gave an art piece to Christine, who also opened, and I gave them both the first editions of the play run that I did. I did an early print as I've been working on this, and I gave them both one of that. Christine was also phenomenal. I forgot to even mention that, but just really quick side note, Christine opened the show and it was so good. It's back to like drag shows to me is like a very one-dimensional art form. There's really nowhere to go. Like you've seen one, you've pretty much seen all of them. And so for somebody to kind of like break out of that, like Christine does with her sort of drag terrorism, and I loved it, but I could see like a lot of the crowds like ready for, they're just ready for the silence afterward. But it was really good. I would say in my top 10 of best shows that I've seen, not my top 5, but in my top 10. It's good. So, all right. Final video. Last video here, Shiver. Which goes through the process. Now the shell is all tattered up, all ripped, torn. Life is just coming in, right? Like that's what this sort of symbolizes to me, is like the tatters of you're here, you're present now, and it's rough, and you've got to find your way and go through some of this medicalization, and there's a whole lot of this going on in a lot of the videos, medical devices and braces and vice and all kinds of stuff. But it goes back to the shell getting a there's actually like a camera scope that you presume goes in through the shell's hole. There's a hole, a fleshy hole, and we enter it, and we come into the entire universe, and there's a big release, a big vocalization release at this point in the song, and a kind of big bang sort of explosion. And also, it's not just the creation of going into life. There's the big giant skull. There's the symbol of death. There is there's no easy dualism here. There's the co-creation of both. In every bit of good, there's evil. In every part of life, there is death. And there's the shell again, the sort of recurrence part of this, the return, or it's finding the self once more in the self, in the person. This gets really abstract because it is abstract. And we go in there and the universe sort of happens, and then we come out, and that is the sort of eschatological ending of the art. You know, you've gone full circle into this sort of apocalyptic ending of I think there's some explosions and stuff in there, but it's like it has a anyway, I probably said enough about it. So yeah, I guess I think, like I said, it's taken me a long time to understand all of this. Let me just check my notes. Anything, last thing I'm missing? You know, I kind of did a lot of this because the performance and the art has had a huge impact on me in my life. It's really directed me to understanding that, and when I start on my own stuff, and I'm going to get into Edward Edinger and the transformation of the God image, it's like I learned a lot by going through all this repeatedly and really thinking about it. And every time I had another thought about it, I just, make a little note and drive around in my car and listen to the songs. And, I've got all my stuff is on various scraps of paper down here. I mean, this is all the stuff I've been writing about this. So, I wrote, that it's not just I'll just kind of conclude with this. What I was saying is that you put stuff out, okay? You make things in the world, they go out there. You have absolutely no control over who interprets it, what they do with it. I heard another great artist, I was sitting and talking with him, and he had his work in a big museum gallery, and he was there with his wife, and this docent was explaining his artwork to the people and saying, like, this is all anti-capitalist and it's rooted in oppression and all this stuff. And his wife just turns to him and says, is any of that true? And he goes, not a bit. And so you just sort of like you put things out there, and in a way I just wrote, like, it seeks another mouth to enter into. It seeks another mind. It seeks another consciousness. When you're doing stuff on this kind of scale, and it's just real interesting. So great respect for Karen and artists who don't become their character. It's very dangerous for Marilyn Manson, for Heath Ledger, for Vince McMahon to become their character. That's a bad artist. Sorry, that's a bad artist. When you actually become your character, that's why I have my show. I have me doing the videos. This is who I am. It's not my character. It's not my art. It's a very different way, but I think it's part of the highest possible attainment that you can get to as an artist. So, looking forward to seeing what happens next, and I'll wrap it up for now. Thanks. Bye.